Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You ever get that feeling like political conversations just skim the surface?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, so today we're doing things a little differently.
That's right.
We're diving deep.
Deep into the currents of black male political thought. It's way more complex than the headlines suggest.
We'll be looking at an opinion piece from the Brookings Institute.
Why are black men mad at Obama? Catchy title.
It is, right? Published just last week on October 18th, 2024.
And it really gets into this frustration that blew up online after some comments Obama made about, well, black men and Kamala Harris.
So just to set the scene, Obama was at a Harris campaign event, and he kind of suggested that black men weren't supporting Harris as much as other groups, maybe because of, sexism. He even brought up Trump's history with black men.
Like that whole Central Park 5 thing?
Exactly, demanding the death penalty even.
Heavy stuff. And that's where the article jumps in.
Right.
Pointing out this, paradox. Black men are statistically the most loyal Democratic voters.
Like rock solid.
But at the same time, there's this feeling of alienation, like they're not being heard.
Okay, so the article does mention Obama's point about sexism, but it goes deeper, talking about neo-sexism.
Which argues that thinking we've achieved gender equality, it actually makes things worse.
Whoa.
But what's really interesting is how they apply it within the black community itself.
Yeah, because the article points out that black women are making serious gains socioeconomically, like surpassing black men in education and things like that.
Which, of course, is great overall,
But it might be affecting how some black men see themselves politically.
like their place in the whole thing. It adds to that feeling of alienation.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is it creating a kind of tension within the community that spills over into politics?
Definitely one layer of it. But the article goes even further. It argues that a lot of black men feel overlooked by Democrats on issues beyond just criminal justice reform.
Right. Like they specifically talk about economic anxieties, saying even with the progress under Obama, a lot of black men are still struggling financially.
And that might explain why they're not so enthusiastic about candidates seen as part of that, elite establishment.
Makes sense. So it's not just about policy, right?
No, it's about representation, feeling seen. And that leads to, I think, the most thought-provoking part of this whole deep dive.
Okay, lay it on me.
The article claims some black men don't fully see Kamala Harris as black because of her Jamaican heritage.
Whoa! Honestly, that surprised me.
It's a loaded topic for sure.
It is.
They bring up the one-drop rule and its history, basically saying anyone with even a trace of black ancestry is black.
Right. But how does that connect to what's happening now?
It raises questions about, who defines blackness in America, even within the community itself.
So it's like the very meaning of being black is being debated.
Exactly.
Wow, this is way more complex than I first thought.
It gets even deeper. The article mentions how Harris's husband is white, which might add to that feeling of disconnect for some. We're not just talking politics anymore.
No, we're talking identity, belonging. It's heavy stuff.
And to really get this, we need to talk about another concept the article brings up. The talented 10th divide.
Okay, break that down for me.
Imagine this. You have a black professor and a black sanitation worker. They're both facing similar challenges, like police brutality.
Right, just by being black men in America.
But their day-to-day lives are totally different. That's the talented 10th divide. Even with shared experiences, there are class divisions within the black community itself.
That's a powerful image. Is the article saying this divide is getting wider?
It's definitely something they highlight. And it kind of mirrors what's happening across society.
Like economic inequality in general.
Exactly. But here, it helps us understand why some black men might feel disconnected from politicians who seem to come from a totally different world, even if they're also black.
Which brings us to another point. Linked fate. This idea that black voters see their political destinies as connected.
Leading to solidarity, a shared purpose.
But is that changing? Is the article saying that this idea of linked fate is weakening?
That's the big question they pose. And it's a crucial one. If that shared sense of destiny is fading, it could change everything about how elections play out in the future. And that's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive.
Ooh, can't wait. We'll explore what a potential weakening of linked fate could mean for black voters and for America as a whole.
It's going to be fascinating. It's interesting to think about this idea of linked fate when, everything's getting more individualistic in America.
Right, like we're all about personal goals now, less about the whole group, huh?
Exactly. And it makes you wonder if that's hitting certain communities even harder.
So is it just black voters? Or is this like a trend across the board?
I think it's happening everywhere. We see it in other groups where, like, shared identity, shared history used to mean everyone voted the same way.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, take the labor movement.
Mm.
Back in the day, workers were united fighting for better conditions.
Right, strength in numbers.
But then the economy changed, people's careers got more diverse, and that whole sense of shared struggle started to, like, fade.
Interesting. So if this linked fate thing is weakening among black voters, what does that even mean for, like, how they vote in the future?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. And to be honest, the article doesn't really try to give us all the answers,
Fair enough.
but it throws out a couple of possibilities. Like maybe we'll see a more, I don't know, fragmented black electorate.
Wait.
Like different groups within that community start focusing on different issues.
So instead of voting as one block,
They're aligning with different candidates, different parties, based on what matters to them personally.
so no more black vote, just a bunch of individuals making their own choices.
That's one way it could go. And that could shake things up big time.
How so?
Well, you might get new voices, new perspectives coming to the forefront. It challenges those old assumptions about how black people vote.
I can see that. But wouldn't that also make it harder to, like, actually make a difference? I mean, if black voters aren't unified, doesn't that weaken their political power?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Linked fate has been a huge force for civil rights, social justice, all that.
Right, pushing for change as a united front.
Exactly. If that weakens, it might be harder to rally people around those shared goals.
So more diverse viewpoints is good, but it could also backfire.
It's a tough balancing act, that's for sure. And it's something black voters will have to figure out as they navigate, this increasingly complex political world.
And all of this started because of Obama's comments about black men and Kamala. You think this linked fate thing might actually explain why some folks were hesitant to support her?
Could be. I mean, if black men aren't feeling as bound by this shared destiny, maybe they're more likely to judge candidates on, like, their individual merits and policies.
Rather than just voting Democrat out of loyalty.
Right, they're thinking for themselves.
So, in a way, this weakening of linked fate could actually be a good thing, like a sign of political maturity.
Could be. It definitely challenges that narrative that there's only one way to be black and vote in this country.
This whole conversation has been a real eye-opener. We started with a simple question about black men being mad at Obama, and now we're talking about, like, huge shifts in how people see themselves, how society works.
It shows you how much is going on beneath the surface. It's not just about one election.
Absolutely. It's about the future of black political engagement and what that means for America as a whole.
Exactly. And these trends are going to keep shaping things for years to come.
Okay, so we focus a lot on black men, but this article was only about them. What about black women? How are they experiencing all of this?
That is the question, isn't it? And unfortunately, the article doesn't really go there.
So black women might be experiencing this linked fate thing differently.
It's definitely possible. I mean, they face their own unique challenges, right?
Yeah.
Sexism, racism, economic struggles, all that.
So their political views might be shaped by those experiences in ways that are different from black men.
Makes sense, right? And remember, black women aren't all the same either. There's a whole spectrum of opinions within that community.
Of course. But generally speaking, I feel like black women have always been really strong on social justice, equality issues.
Oh, absolutely. They've been leading the charge on voting rights, criminal justice reform, all of it.
So even if this whole linked fate thing is fading, you think black women might still be more focused on those collective goals?
It's definitely a possibility. They have this long history of organizing, of fighting for what's right, even when it's not directly impacting them personally.
That's powerful.
It is. That sense of purpose, of fighting for the whole community, it runs deep.
This deep dive has been incredible. We started with this one question about black men and Obama, and now look at us.
Right, we would indeed.
We talked about, what was it, neo-sexism, the talented 10th, linked fate, respectability politics.
We barely scratched the surface.
But we've learned so much about how complex black political thought really is. It's not just one thing, and it's always changing.
Exactly. And that's something to celebrate, I think. That diversity, that willingness to question things.
So to our listeners out there, the next time you hear someone talking about the black vote like it's some simple thing,
Or like black people all think alike.
remember this deep dive.
Remember the nuances, the different perspective.
And always, always dig deeper.
Because the truth is way more interesting than any headline or soundbite could ever capture.
Absolutely. This has been an amazing conversation.
Truly insightful.
And I feel like we've only just begun.
I know, right? But for now, let's leave it there. Keep those minds curious, everyone, and keep those perspectives open.
Okay, so before we wrap up this deep dive, there's one more thing from the article I wanted to touch on. Respectability politics. It feels really connected to everything we've been talking about.
Oh, for sure. It's a big one, especially in this context.
So for those who haven't heard the term, what exactly does it mean?
Basically, it's this idea that marginalized groups, to gain acceptance, they have to play by the dominant group's rules, act a certain way, dress a certain way. Like, if we're respectable, they'll have to treat us right.
Right, like proving you're worthy of respect.
Exactly. And different groups have tried it throughout history with varying degrees of success.
And the article suggests some black men are kind of pushing back against that idea, especially when you see continued police violence no matter how people act.
It's like they're saying, we've tried playing by the rules, but we're still getting targeted, so why bother?
It's a powerful statement, especially coming from a generation that's grown up seeing so much injustice online, no matter how black men present themselves.
Absolutely. There's less patience for that prove-yourself mentality. It reflects a shift in the black community, wanting equality on their own terms, not by someone else's standards.
And it makes me think about that talented 10th divide we were talking about. If there's this disconnect between different classes within the black community, maybe respectability politics doesn't hit everyone the same way.
Totally. A black professor and a black sanitation worker, their daily lives are totally different, so their views on this would likely be different too.
Right. And then you add in the whole history of the one-drop rule, the debate over what it means to be black. It's like this huge puzzle, and there's no one answer.
It's so complex, all these threads weaving together this tapestry of black political thought.
Exactly. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this whole conversation. Black political thought is way more diverse, way more dynamic than a lot of people realize. It's constantly evolving, responding to all these different forces.
That's just one thing. It's a whole spectrum.
And that complexity makes these conversations so much more interesting, so much more important.
Absolutely. It's something to be embraced.
So, to our listeners out there, next time you hear someone oversimplifying the black vote or black issues, remember this deep dive.
Remember the nuances, the different experiences, the history.
Don't be afraid to challenge those assumptions, to dig a little deeper.
Because there's always more to the story. And often, it's way more fascinating than anyone could have imagined.
This has been an amazing journey exploring this article, this topic. I feel like we've learned so much.
Me too. And honestly, I think we've only just scratched the surface.
But for now, we'll have to leave it here. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
And to everyone listening, keep those minds curious and those perspectives open.